Hello, this is Tony Heller from RealClimateScience.com discussing one aspect of the Biden administration war on women and children. American women have been using clean, low-cost natural gas for cooking for well over a century. 90 years ago, a meal could be cooked in a gas oven for less than half a penny. April 10, 1932, natural gas cost is small. In addition to being extremely economical, the modern automatic gas range brings hours and hours of newfound time to the housewife to devote to her children or recreation. It is surely a new era in cookery when the home manager can spend all afternoon away from home and return shortly before the dinner hour and find a hot, delicious dinner ready to be served. Perhaps these are the reasons why 15 million American housewives find gas indispensable in their daily routine and why 75 million Americans eat gas-cooked meals. 90 years ago, cooking a meal cost less than half a penny, but under the Biden administration, natural gas prices have more than quadrupled. And it's been the same story with electricity. 70 years ago, women who weren't cooking with natural gas were using clean, reliable electric ovens. But like the cost of natural gas, by design, the cost of electricity has skyrocketed.
Under my plan of a cap and trade system, electricity rates would necessarily skyrocket.
Whatever technologies are out there that are being presented, whatever power plants that are being built, that they would have to meet the rigors of that market and the ratcheted down caps that are imposed every year. So if somebody wants to build a coal-powered plant, they can. It's just that it will bankrupt them because they're going to be charged a huge sum for all that greenhouse gas that's being emitted.
Horrifically bad government energy policies are putting women in a position where they may have to choose between heating their homes and feeding their families. And for some, the choices will be even worse than that. As a direct result of Biden administration energy policies, both food and energy prices are skyrocketing out of control. But this video isn't focused on the United States or Europe, it's about Africa. Almost 50 years ago, the New York Times said global cooling was causing severe droughts and starvation in Africa. But now the New York Times has changed their story. They no longer say global cooling causes droughts and starvation in Africa. Now they blame it on global warming, meaning the burning of fossil fuels. In this January 6, 2017 article, they said that the starvation in Africa was Donald Trump's fault. That was a pretty remarkable claim because Donald Trump didn't become president until 2 weeks later. At that time, Obama and Biden had been in the White House for 8 years. It was almost 9 years after Obama said he'd healed the planet and slowed the rise of the seas.
And I am absolutely certain that generations from now, we will be able to look back and tell our children that this was the moment when we began to provide care for the sick and good jobs to the jobless. This was the moment when the rise of the oceans began to slow and our planet began to heal.
Apparently that didn't work out very well, so the New York Times felt the need to blame somebody else. Now let's take a look at what the real story is with Democrats, the press, and Africa. Here's an article from the New York Times in 1969. A sterility drug in food is hinted. Biologist stresses the need to curb population growth. A possibility that the government might have to put sterility drugs in reservoirs and in food shipped to foreign countries to limit human population was envisioned today by a leading crusader on the population problem. Leaders of the black community correctly identified this population control being advocated by the New York Times as genocide. Let's look now how the story has evolved over the last 50 years. John Kerry is Joe Biden's climate advisor. 2 years ago, he said the Great Reset will happen at greater speed and intensity than people might imagine. This week, John Kerry was in Africa. He told them they needed to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions and warned them not to rely on natural gas to bring power to millions of people. His speech was full of misinformation, and I've already done a video about that, but I want to focus on one sentence from it in this video. He said, "Every year we now lose 10 million of our fellow human beings globally to extreme heat and air pollution. According to Oxford University, the number of deaths from all types of natural disasters has plummeted over the last century. This includes all meteorological and climate events. And over the last decade, there was an average of 45,260 deaths per year around the world from natural disasters. But John Kerry said there were 10 million deaths globally per year due to extreme heat and air pollution. In other words, almost all of those deaths were due to air pollution rather than extreme heat. We can see what's actually going on this World Economic Forum webpage. Cooking with polluting fuels is a silent killer. Here's what can be done. Nearly 4 million people around the world die from illnesses linked to cooking with polluting fuels, meaning dung and wood. A third of the people on the planet lack access to clean fuels. Most of the women in Africa don't have access to the clean-burning natural gas and electric stoves which women in the United States have enjoyed for over a century. And John Kerry and the World Economic Forum want to make sure that they don't get natural gas in the future. Africa only generates 3.7% of global CO2 emissions. But John Kerry says they need to reduce their emissions and they can't use natural gas. We can see in these population graphs why Africa is being targeted for more human misery. The population of Europe is declining, and in North America growth rates are much lower than they were in the past. But in Africa, the population is growing very quickly. For more than 50 years, the agenda of globalists has been to reduce the population of Africa. And 50 years ago, leaders of the black community recognized the agenda was genocide. So globalists have become more clever. They don't want to be accused of genocide, so now they hide their evil behind rescuing women and children from climate change. They don't want people in Africa cooking with the same natural gas which they use in their own homes. Toto's been pulling back the curtain on this incredibly cynical agenda for the past 14 years. You can visit him, Kyrie Caesar, Toki and Upala on the web at realclimatescience.com.